This is Greg Canty here, and welcome to the Win Happy podcast. Stay tuned for interesting chats with interesting people about winning their lives and being happy at the same time. This show has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with Richard Stafford, founder of Fettle.ie, the new online mental health support service in Ireland. Richard was a victim of sexual abuse when he was just 12, and the demons from this experience led him to taking comfort in excessive alcohol consumption, which very nearly ended his life. 3 years ago, he tried to take his own life, and he has since come back from rock bottom through therapy and the help of others. He founded Fettle.ie to help others struggling with their mental health in a cost-effective, easy-to-access, non-stigmatised way by providing online therapy. Let's hear from Richard. Richard Stafford, founder of Fettle and the CEO. How are you keeping? Welcome to the Win Happy podcast.
I'm very well, Greg. Thank you so much for having me on. Really looking forward to having a chat. I've listened to one or two of your previous episodes. You have a really interesting group of people that you've been chatting to in the recent past. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
Yeah, thanks a million. And the whole idea is that I bring on interesting people with interesting stories who are doing interesting things. And I know you fit the bill definitely.
Right.
So what I'd like to do is for the listener to get to know you a little bit before we start talking about Fettle and how it works and what you do and the services that you offer. So if you don't mind, I'd like to hit a big colossal rewind button and ask you the question. Who the hell is Richard Stafford and where do you come from?
Sure. Thanks, Greg. Well, I'm 41. Maybe you can tell by my accent, I'm kind of from Wexford. And I lived for 20 years, I suppose, in Dublin, in London. Did a lot of traveling around. I worked for software companies for many years. And a couple of years ago, I had a bit of a turning point in my life. I kind of walked a tightrope or a thin line for many years where I was balancing a fantastic professional career, but I had a very turbulent life in my personal life. I grew up in Wexford. I had a series of incidents or things happen in my life that kind of shaped the next 20 years. And it all really started for me when I was 10, 11, 12. And unfortunately, I was the victim of sexual abuse. And that rolled into my poor mum having a long illness with cancer and eventually passed away when I was 15. So that's two major significant issues in my life. But what that meant or what that manifested itself into was I was a very unhappy, a very angry and frustrated 15, 16-year-old guy living in Wexford. I also, many years later, I had to go into treatment a couple of times. I struggled with alcoholism. And many years later, I was diagnosed with having ADHD. So I didn't, despite, being told, you're a very intelligent, very smart guy, but a lot of it was put down to my mum. No one knew about the sexual abuse that I had been a victim of. So it was really just kind of, there's a lot going on in his life in terms of his poor mum. But there was a lot of other things going on as well. And that manifested, as I say, into struggling with alcohol. I kind of found something that was an escapism. I would have struggled very much with living life. This is looking back around 1997, 1998. Interestingly, Wexford won the All-Ireland hurling final in 1996. That would have been the first year that I suppose I would have been a regular on the kind of drinking scene, if you want. And my whole personal life had been an absolute kind of a very deeply, darkly depressing time in my life. So I found alcohol and that was an escapism. I like to kind of say that when I started drinking, maybe that I never really came up for air for the best parts of 2 decades, really. And that was my story. I lurched a little bit from one area to another. I did a few what they call geographical changes. Where I thought that if I went somewhere else, maybe I would be different, but obviously I won't. But I take myself.
You brought yourself with you.
That's it. I take my head with me. And I tried numerous times. I lived in Canada, I lived in New York, I lived in different parts of Ireland, and there was a pattern that would develop where I would get in a considerable amount of personal turmoil and cause a lot of angst and a lot of stress to the people around me that love me. I would improve very dramatically. Things would get better very, very quickly. I seemed to be able to always kind of keep certain areas around work and career moving along. And I had tried, and I know we won't go into Fettle right now, but Fettle is an online therapy platform. I had tried accessing mental health support, more than 20 years ago in Ireland, and found, this isn't for me. I'm only a young man. Why would I want to talk to somebody? Instead, what I did was talk to a barman for the next 20 years. Saw my life get progressively worse. And I would say that if I was to try and pick some sort of analogy, it would be that I'm stepping into the ring with a prize fighter. That prize fighter is alcohol and all the baggage from my past. And I keep getting knocked down, but I keep getting knocked up. And every time I get knocked up, every time I stand up again, I would look out into the crowd and I would slowly see this group of friends leaving, this family member walking away, this career opportunity walking away, and eventually you're kind of left there and you just can't. It's the definition of insanity, You just keep on repeating the same things over and over again. But to very quickly kind of move forward in life, I reached a point just under 3 years ago, which they call I had reached a jumping off point, is what they might call it. And I didn't see a life the way I was living, or with alcohol, or with my current way of living. And I didn't see, a life without it. So I tried to take my own life, and, not to be too graphic about it, I cut my wrists, and I have the scars here today, and I kind of look at them. Pretty much I would look at them, I don't know how many times a day, 100 times a day, to keep in my head, the motivation and the gratitude that I have today for having had some sort of a spiritual awakening or a bolt of reality, or to come up for air that first time and turn around and say, God, I want help, and I do anything to get help. And I got great help. I got counselling access through the Rape Crisis Centre. I had previously been in a 12-step recovery group. I went back into that again. I got all the support I needed. And very quickly, things got very good, very straight away. I had been in a long-term, very loving relationship, and that managed to get back, which was probably one of the biggest miracles of recovery. And what I've just outlined really, is I go to this 12-step recovery meeting a few days a week or a few nights a week. And all amongst us and all around us in Ireland today and all over the world are people that have had tremendous struggles, no matter what area or walk of life they're in, no matter what social standing they're in, are dealing every day and overcoming tremendous difficulties, tremendous stories of sheer pain and hurt that they didn't ask for or that was inflicted upon them. And it ended up causing them distress and pain through addiction. And I feel very grateful and very lucky that I have a great network around me. And I was able to divert all my energies into a work project, which so far is going fantastic.
Wow. That was a bit of a turbo telling of your story.
Yeah, so I realised there's probably a quarter century of a lot of pain and hurt just said in about 2 minutes there. But, I'm kind of used to telling a story that for years I masqueraded and I danced around and I kind of lied and, and I would have blamed one or two issues of it and used it in various forms, almost as a manipulative thing. And once you come full circle and you just get on with things and you do the necessary steps, whether it be, the recovery group meetings, whether it's a bit of meditation, I now feel very happy and very comfortable to say anything to anybody about my story, because I realise how many more people are out there suffering, how many other people are out there have come through more things that are bigger than what I would perceive my own things to be. I think there's that saying that if you're sitting in a circle full of people and you threw your problems in the middle, you would take your own back out very quickly,
Yeah. So your upbringing, you were raised in Wexford.
I was raised in Wexford.
Was that a small family? Was that a big family?
No, I was raised in Wexford with, up, as I say, up until the age of 10, from a very normal, loving family where, I had two older brothers who were very heavily involved in sport. My mother was a local primary school teacher, my dad a local businessman. So a really comfortable, really nice existence. Things, as I say, got upended, particularly around the time of the abuse and the time that my poor mum got sick. At that stage, my two older brothers would have moved away to third level college, and I found that I was on my own a lot now, and I started to kind of, I suppose, retreat into myself an awful lot, and whereas before I hadn't discovered the escapism of alcoholism, I would have read a lot and I would have watched a lot of, reading was something, I suppose, that would have provided that escapism before the age of 15 or 16.
Yeah, there's a few things kind of crashing together from what you're saying to me. There's this terrible abuse that you had to deal with. There was a culture of drinking in Ireland.
Yep.
And there probably still is to a fair degree. And there's also a culture with men in particular, I think, of not talking to anyone. So if you wrap all of those three things together, you end up getting Richard Stafford with a huge drinking problem before you can scratch. You can tell me as little or as much as you want to, but the nature of that abuse, did that happen when you were very young? Is that outside the family or?
So it was outside the family. It was at 10, 11, 12. I read an article quite recently, actually, in The Guardian, where on average it takes a person 25 years to come out and talk about the abuse that they may have suffered. And that's exactly what I found my story was. I found I was 35. I was washed up at this stage again. I was in St. John of God's. I was under the care of, after the addiction or the alcoholism unit in there. And that's where the abuse came out, really. It was the first time that I ever really talked about it. I had briefly mentioned it to one or two very close friends. So that was my experience. That no, I never said a word to anybody. Since then, I've went and I've progressed where I made an allegation or a report. It's progressed on and on and on through the DBP, etc. And and again, I realised that we'll tie all of this in later in the conversation to the business now that I founded. But the therapy that I received through the Rape Crisis Centre was instrumental in supporting me along through that process. It was weekly, it was online. It was something really that has been the underpinning kind of foundational lifeline of my support, basically, and my recovery.
Okay. And on the face of it, Richard, now, I don't know you, but I do my own little Mr. Google on Richard Stafford, and we present ourselves in a particular way. And when I look at LinkedIn in particular, it looked like a fairly regular man progressing through an IT career. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so I was a software sales guy, which is probably the best job, or most, I'm sure there obviously, it's a very good job to have had in Ireland for the last 20 years. We've had an amazing array of companies and innovative companies in terms of culture and in terms of travel and what you get access to. And I fell into sales in my early 20s. No one really leaves college and says, I want to be a sales guy. I fell into very unglamorous sales. So I was selling advertising over the phone and things like this. Lots of calls, very high volume. And just through my network, and I moved into working with some multinationals, and I had fantastic success with them. On one occasion, for example, I was on what they call President's Club, which is was in Hawaii. We had a private concert with Stevie Wonder, and at the same time, my car was taxed at home. So this was the sort of life that I was kind of leading. I was kind of balancing the fact that my personal life was in disarray, whereas, I was still close in business, and I just seemed to have an aptitude. And I learned so much in counselling and in therapy about people that are abused when they're younger tends to have very heightened senses of awareness around people's motivations or people's, I suppose, genuineness, if that's a word, around them. And I found that the common feedback I got with my career over the years were that my instincts were very good, because the best answer you can get in sales is no, and the sooner you get it, the better. And an awful lot of people will spend an awful lot of time working with a company or working with an individual that they're never going to be able to buy or to be able to sell to. And I found that 80% of my time was spent in my personal life in trouble, but that 20% that I was turned on, my instincts were very, very good, and I had a great I suppose I had a great experience where I got to travel a lot, got to work with a lot of great companies, but I got feedback from very kind managers saying things like, you're at 20%. If I had you at 30%, you would not only be the best here, you'd be the best around. And I know, or you were a Mercedes with 4 flat tires was another bit of feedback. But I recently did an interview for another paper, and a very senior IT guy that's based in the UK got in touch with me and was like, I didn't realise what was going on in your personal life. And I was surprised and a little bit disappointed that I wasn't able to support you as much as I should have. I knew there was probably something that a little bit off, but I'm delighted, that things are going well at the moment. So things like that are so nice when somebody turns around and talks to you.
So, Richard, despite your life being in turmoil and like a big, huge washing machine of troubles and issues and drink and dark days and everything else, you worked with some incredible companies. I'm looking at the brands there. There was Salesforce and Oracle, a lot of very senior roles. So you have to become an expert as well at kind of putting a version of yourself out there as a functioning professional.
Absolutely. I don't know how many times that I was traveling to a meeting and maybe the brake pads or something was going on in the car, and I'm pulling in and discussing, very complex and large multi-year type deals with organizations. And I was just very lucky that the instincts I think that I had developed, or as maybe a lot of them as defensive type mechanisms, generally goods people that are successful in sales sometimes tend to do a bit or verge maybe in that spectrum of ADHD. If you ask me, and I do it now for my own business, the financial type things, maybe VAT returns, etc. That for me is, I want to run a mile before I can do something like that. But if you sit me down and let me talk to somebody, I can very quickly find out, if this person is somebody that's going to be able to buy from us, if they have the decision-making powers to buy from us, if they actually have the need, if they're just doing something to talk to somebody, And it was just something that, I think a combination of factors was able to, I suppose, and I sound, I don't want to sound actually, and I'm cognizant that I'm talking about myself in a very positive light. And that's not necessarily the type of person I am, but it probably was the one thing that I was quite good at, was ensuring that I had able to hit target, able to exceed target, because I had so much pressure on in my personal life. This was something that I found was quite easy, was to turn around and go, this is easy. I have all the technical support all around me. I have all the resources that the biggest companies in the world will throw at you in terms of putting on a show for a client, if it's bringing them out for dinner or if it's doing some sort of a demonstration of the product. All I need to do is be the middleman, and that's the other element of what a good sales guy is. And just coordinating what's going on around you, and just knowing, understanding, and being put into people. I think reciprocity is something that a lot of salespeople don't tend to understand in the business world. Is that, I'm not going to give out for not to get too granular or down in the weeds around my sort of work, but I'm never going to send out a quote to somebody unless there's a specific reason for it, unless I'm waiting for it, unless I have a commitment for something in return,
In a way, Richard, was work an escape from life?
No, it wasn't, Craig. It's an interesting question. No, work was the thing that 20% of my time that allowed me to disappear for the other 80% of the time. And I just happened to have that. That was the only time I was in reality, basically. That was the only time that I was engaging with other people, the only time I was part of a team, the only time that I had value to add to society as a whole. But because it financed the other 80% of my time, and I'd like to think right now it's kind of, that's flipped on its head, so that 80% of my time now is spent in reality and 20% is spent going for a nice walk, listening to a podcast, listening to something on Audible. And that's where I get the escapism from now.
Yeah.
Was very, very depressed is the way to put it, and led me to that suicide attempt. So at that point, I didn't know what I wanted to do, wasn't sure if I could go back into that world again. It is a quite social activity of a job in terms of the fact that you do need to be entertaining clients, you do need to be traveling a bit. It is risky for people of my makeup, like you're sitting there with your company credit card on you. You have ample opportunity to go for a dinner, you're sitting in an airport and have a drink. And unfortunately, I'm a very good person with good people around me, but I'm dangerous to have alcohol, that all bets are off. and that would have manifested only in literally the last year of my career, where I might have slept in for an event or something like that. And yes, the spotlight would have began to have been shone on myself, like.
Yeah, because again, like that, on the surface, I had a quick peep at your LinkedIn profile, and from 2004 up to when you founded Fettle, it looked pretty much like you moved from role to role. A lot of good companies, a lot of good brands. Were a lot of those moves, did they happen because, okay, I'm getting under pressure here and I'll move somewhere else, or what was going on?
No, there was nothing like that. It's just there's always a thing in me that's a little bit maybe of wanderlust, like, is that I don't want to be where I am. So I honestly, there's the other side of it is probably the recruitment industry. Not to blame or generalize an entire industry here, but they've become so good at trying to attract, and talent is hard to attract for companies, that the amount of requests that you're getting on LinkedIn, and yes, absolutely, you could be sitting in work on a Tuesday morning and just getting kind of bombarded with requests from recruiters and just going, yeah, I'm going to go, whereas like, so I would say it was just me, and my makeup is that no matter where I am, I probably want to be somebody else, or somewhere else, like.
Yeah. In a work context, Richard, did you have good buddies, good managers down through the years who may have noticed something was wrong and support you in any way, or was that even a factor? Did they even get to realize that there might be something up here?
I've had one or two amazing managers in the last number of years, and I think it was part of the cultural makeup that you have with the American technology companies, that I personally have had one or two interactions when I started Fettle, just through some state agencies and state bodies in terms of funding, etc., where I was amazed. I had never been exposed to what I thought was an attitude that had probably disappeared from Ireland. So I've had a couple of managers, one in Oracle in particular, who was fantastic, who genuinely has made a massive impact in my life, and somebody who I would be eternally grateful to, So there are absolutely some amazing and fantastically empathetic managers out there that I've been so lucky to have on my side, And I think they just see the genuineness in me as the person, and somebody that's struggling with something that's out of my control almost.
And friends and family, Richard, did they know what was going on?
Yeah, so I've been lucky. While I've lost a lot of friends, if you want, but I have maintained some very close relationships. I'm the type of guy that has very close friends, but I'm a solitary type of person as well. It's that I don't want to call myself a lone wolf of a sales guy, if you want, but I genuinely, like, I'm a hungry sales guy when I'm on form, like, and I would act on my own, like, and I would go after my own deals, like.
Okay. Yeah, I saw on your LinkedIn profile there were some lovely recommendations written by people, and I think just what you're after explaining to me, I think they pretty much said in the recommendations to you. For anyone that's gone through something horrible and they're battling with it and trying to survive, trying to cover up, trying to masquerade, whatever words that we'll use, have you a little formula for them? Have you a path for them?
Well, I think the amount of people that are struggling in Ireland would stun you and amaze you, because, and I can speak with very intimate knowledge about the industry that I've just spent the last 20 minutes describing. There are a huge amount of people that fall through the cracks, that kind of get into trouble. And my personal background is my family owned a pub. So I'm very familiar with the drinking culture in Ireland. And I think that there's a huge amount of people that are under pressure that are out there. And in terms of like how people can approach, it's so hard. Like, they call it a rock bottom, or they call it some sort of other significant thing that will happen, but like it can be described as getting the dart from one side of Dublin to the next. You don't have to wait to get off at the end of the line, but it's very hard to get off before that, For me, I had to get to that end of the line situation. I, of course, when I was 19 and 20, if therapy, if counselling, if talking to a mental health professional was something that I thought was for me, I think it would have made a massive difference. Again, for me, I'm in a 12-step recovery meeting group a couple of nights a week. that makes a huge difference. There's connection to it, there's community, there's the fact somebody is going through the same thing that you've gone through. But I would be remiss, or I would be very hesitant or reticent to ever say, to tell anybody what they should or should not do. I can only say for me, my story was that I had a glimpse of recovery in my late 20s. And for a couple of years, I did stay sober, but I didn't change me. I just kind of just stayed sober. I went to meetings, but I didn't do any work on myself, and I was talking about the 12 kind of steps of recovery. And until I've started to actually work them into my life and change. Because even though the paradox of the makeup or genetic makeup of people that struggle with alcohol is we very often so pull against changing, don't ever change, because there's probably a lot of self-defense stuff there. But in reality, the ego aspect to it is that we deeply, deeply feel troubled with who we are as people, and we dislike ourselves, but we still won't change, So there's a lot more educated people and experienced people than me could probably tease that out a little bit further. But to go back to your question is, no, I wouldn't feel right in any way saying this is what you need to do to anybody.
Okay. And in your own situation, and I know you spoke about arriving at rock bottom, I'm sure there were many moments before that point when you were wrestling with your demons. And how did you kind of rationalize that with yourself? Did you think, I'm going to get through this? And did you see a path for yourself? Did you think, I'm going to be okay? And at the time, you still didn't have that solution. Obviously, that solution came a lot later. Did you always believe I'll be fine at some point just to get over this spot or the next spot?
At the end, I didn't. So that's that jumping off point. You don't see a life with the way you're living or without. So with drink or without drink, you don't see a life with either. I would have said that age was a factor for me, is that I would have continuously thought there was a long road ahead of me. So I would have always said, sure, look, you're all right, you're only in your 20s, you'll be okay, you'll settle down, you're all right, you're only in your 30s, you're okay, you're in your mid-30s, and then all of a sudden you get a real sense of you're not that young anymore. And honestly, I had ran out of road in terms of trying to fool myself with that type of rationalising. And honestly, as simple as that was, eventually age caught up to me a little bit, and I got sicker and sicker. I was in hospital on numerous occasions. I had a very serious condition that developed called bilateral foot drop, where it's damage to this what's called a perineal nerve, where you can't lift your feet properly, the front of your feet. And you get it from hard living and drinking and blood poisoning. And it ended up where I had to get braces made for my ankles. Now, I have been active despite all of this kind of mayhem, if you want, in my personal life and my work. I had actually been quite active in terms of doing a lot of outdoor activity, a lot of sport, a lot of rock climbing. And now all of a sudden, I'm tripping on the street. I was living in London on the time, and you get tired and you can't lift your feet properly. And you walk at a very exaggerated walk, as if you're trying to walk up a staircase while walking on the street. And, I was told it may get better, it may not get better, it normally does. And it took 8-9 months before it was fully right again, So these type of things were beginning to happen, where they would have most certainly incentivized me to understand that, look, the gig is up here, you can't fool yourself anymore, you're not 21.
That rock bottom day, Richard, when did that happen?
That would have happened at the suicide attempt, Greg. So I had plenty of what other people might be perceived rock bottoms, but we all have our own original or our own journey. And for me, that was it. For me, it was as I say, it wasn't necessarily anything that was out of the ordinary, or that's a long number of years of suicidal ideation and of depression and frustration that you continuously make a few mistakes. So unfortunately, that was the day. But then the following day was the first bit of relief that I got when I reached out to people I had previously met in recovery, and I got back on I got back out walking, and I walked, I think, for months and months and months, and got the help I needed.
When was that?
That will be nearly 3 years ago now, in about another month or so.
Okay. And the people around you, had they any idea you were at that point, did they?
They did, yeah, absolutely. They did. They were very worried because I had spent 20 years struggling in my personal life. And yes, they were worried that things weren't going to end well. There was only one way this was going to go, really,
How do you rebuild? How do you rebuild from that point 3 years ago?
Yeah, so good question. So, like for me, number one was I took action and I reached out to the people I had previously met in recovery. I went back to meetings 4, 5, 6 nights a week. Started counselling with the Rape Crisis Centre. And I think the magic word here was action, was that I am one day at a time. So I said, for today, I'm going to do what I need to do is the best thing. And eventually, over time, over the next year or two, things start to creep into your life where you suddenly began to get a few more awakenings from maybe building meditation and mindfulness into your life. But right now, right at the very start, it was a daily battle, basically. It's a daily thing of, I need to get to a meeting tonight. I need to, just put out this little fire. Eventually, your life just clicks. It just starts to get a little bit better. You're dealing with, and from my experience of dealing with people that have been in addiction, you're dealing with people that if they were able to put the energy that they'd spent on trying to maintain their life of living in addiction, there's tremendous ingenuity in that. There's tremendous talent in that. There's tremendous drive in it. Now it's misdirected and unfortunately it's self-sabotaging. So when a psychological switch changed in my head to say, I'm a very stubborn person and I said, I'm not going to show people that this is how I'm going to go out. Like, I want to do something better. Like, I want that feeling of pride about myself. Like, I'm not going to let anybody get one over on me. All this is perceived in my head now, and not a lot. I can't imagine not a lot of people were thinking about me, but in my head, I'm like, I want to show myself and other people wrong. I want to prove them wrong.
And were you working at this point?
No, I was working. I wasn't working. I was pretty much washed up.
Okay. So we've got this guy with rock solid sales experience in IT, some of the best brands.
Yeah.
We've also got this personal experience, and you're coming out of dark clouds. So when were the first seeds of Fettle sown?
Well, as I said, I had started online counselling, and I have a very good friend, a very close personal friend of mine, who's had a very successful career. He's the CEO and founder, John O'Connor, of a company in Waterford based called Collect. They're a publicly listed company. And John and I had talked about maybe one or two different business ideas, and he was willing to give me a bit of startup capital to kind of get things moving. And we made a few iterations and a few pivots and a few changes. And I suddenly kind of went, well, where am I getting the most benefit out of my life at the moment? And when I look and I do all the research, and that was something that I suppose I would have developed quite a keen sense of, is understanding, researching companies and researching the current marketplace and who are the incumbents, what's their strengths and what's their weaknesses, and where I think the opportunity lies. And we decided that we were going to launch Fettle, which is an online therapy platform where we connect you with individual therapists in Ireland. And the more I looked into it, the more I saw how much of an opportunity there is for somebody to make a difference in Ireland. I saw how much of a need there was. Like, at my personal career, so General Omar Bradley was a famous general in World War II. And he had a famous saying that amateurs talk tactics and professionals talk logistics. So you can take out logistics and put in execution there. So essentially, it's great to have a vision that, I've had a transformative effect from counselling building into my life. But now how do you actually, and I want to do the same in Ireland, but how do you actually execute on that? And that's where my experience in the past had come. I had sold sales and marketing and CRM solutions and digital first type mobile transformational projects to the leading brands and gaming and on-demand customers across the world. So I understood the space, and when I looked at therapy in Ireland, I thought it lived in an analog type world, really, And when I looked at some of the data, one statistic, Greg, that kind of stuck out for me as to why it was the core reason why Ireland is really in need of a more digital first type solution to enable or give people permission to talk to a mental health professional. And in Ireland, 92% of people, according to a survey that the Irish Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy did, have said that 92% said, yes, it is a good idea to talk to a mental health professional if you're struggling. But in Ireland, only 11% of people actually do. why is there such a big gap? Because what that would say to me is, despite all the it's okay not to be okay and all the talk we hear in the media, etc., nobody talks to which is the most effective treatment for any sort of behaviour or mental health issue is psychotherapy and counselling. 75% of people who engage with it will benefit from it. So why aren't people talking like this? Because the data would say everybody knows it's okay not to be okay, but nobody actually goes and talks to somebody. So there's 3 reasons, and they were access, cost, and stigma. So if I was able to address those 3 barriers with a business, then I believe that there was just a tsunami, if you want, of people that were just waiting for a solution that looked and felt normal and made them feel it's okay to talk to somebody. And starting with the name Fettle, I chose the name Fettle because it wasn't therapy for you or therapy on demand. Regardless if anybody knows what Fettle means, it means to be in good form. You might have heard the expression "in fine fettle" before.
Yeah.
But it's because it's not anything to do with therapy, and I made it accessible. I made it affordable. What I saw in Ireland was I saw years behind the curve in terms of digital adoption. I saw companies that were operating online from a mental health perspective, but almost thinking that being online gave them a license to charge more or as much as in a face-to-face world. And just trying to understand the basic economics of online trading is that, I don't want to use a term like we're commoditizing mental health support, but we're certainly democratizing it. And we're certainly ensuring that people are able to get easier access to it. So I looked at the other side then, the supply side of the platform, if you want, which are the counsellors. And this was also startling, was again from reports from the Irish Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, where that 4 out of 10 counsellors in Ireland work less than 5 hours per week, and 7 out of 10 work on a part-time basis. So we have literally thousands of fully trained and qualified accredited mental health professionals in Ireland that can't get clients. They've probably spent 6 to 7 years of their life, spent 40 to 50,000 to get fully qualified, and they can't get clients. So where I thought I was now going to add value and make an impact in Ireland was present a platform where people can book a session in a few clicks, get matched to a therapist. They can, afford it. So we don't want people just to think, I can only afford 4 or 5 very expensive weeks therapy and I'm expecting very fast results and I'm only focused on one specific issue. I kind of want to build a therapeutic hour into people's lives. So I believe as a kind of I know I'm a long-winded type of answer here, but I believe as a kind of a concept that we're all living in an age of bewilderment now. So Yuval Noah Harari would probably be my favourite author for the last number of years. And he wrote Sapiens and Homo Deus. He's described how humanity now lives in an age of bewilderment, where all the old stories that we thought we once knew, they're just not true anymore. So what he means by that is, I have too much data at my fingertips, I'm seeing too much of what's going on around the world. And, we're in this age of bewilderment. So we're living in a version 1000 world with a V1 operating system, if you want to put it that way. So I just feel that there more and more, there's going to be a need for people to have this interaction with somebody, their professional problem solver and listener once per week, their therapeutic hour. And I believe that's, where I want Fettle to be. Like, I want Fettle to normalise and give people access to very highly qualified mental health professionals.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned cost, access and stigma. And the other point, and it's probably wrapped around all of those, which is convenience, because even me hopping in the car, driving into Cork City, finding a parking spot, trekking up to whatever therapist, that adds another hour to the equation. And, all the ancillary costs like parking and all those other kind of things. And suddenly they become barriers to even doing that. Jesus, I can't be doing that every week. So you're making it as easy to access as the point was. Sorry, for making that analogy between the two of them or that comparison, but the more easy it gets.
Essentially, of all the aspects that we've now got used to in terms of virtual living as a result of the pandemic, it's really sticky online therapy for all the reasons you've just outlined. I have a wider choice of what therapists I have access to. It's more cost effective. It's more time effective. I can build it into my weekly calendar at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or at 7 o'clock in the evening, and I don't have to leave the house. Some of the feedback that we get from the therapists that work on the platform are that the clients will love it. They might have a cat on their lap or a dog in the room. They have the privacy of not having to traipse, as you say, into town, get parking. Oh, did Mary see me walking into such and such his office, and it's really one of the really sticky aspects that have come out of COVID is that online therapy actually works. It's just as effective as face-to-face. And for me, it has been an eye-opener. I'm the type of guy who, and there's plenty of other people in Ireland, if I get a belt of a hurl in a hurling match, I'll go to the doctor if I've cut my eye or something like that. But if I'm just not feeling myself or not feeling well, it really would take a very crisis-orientated situation for me to justify dropping everything for 3 hours out of my day, whereas now I can log on to a meeting with my counsellor and I can log off 45 minutes later and I'm back at work 10 minutes later.
Yeah. And I know I went onto your website and there's a big selection of highly qualified individuals. Yeah. And they can be located anywhere in the country. So that adds that extra level of, and I know it's all confidential, but for some people might deliver that extra little level of comfort and maybe even suitable from an age demographic and all that kind of stuff. People might have different kind of preferences. So you're enabling all of that. And for yourself, Richard, maybe you would have an extreme set of circumstances.
Yeah.
For now, and I know the Irish attitude towards therapy, if you look at the States, everyone has their therapist.
Yeah.
I presume that's a good thing. And it doesn't have to be a case of I've got a huge problem. Maybe there's a small problem. And for whatever reason, I can't talk to my wife, my partner. I can't talk to my colleagues. I don't feel I can talk to my best buddy. Sometimes it's really good just to have an outlet, isn't it? So it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can be quite an ordinary, like I've really been blue during COVID. It's going on longer than a week or two and I'm really down. Might that be a reason for going on to fettle.ie and making an inquiry?
Well, Greg, you've just asked a really great question there, and I'm very grateful for that because you've just outlined something that is really important. And that is the fact that you don't have to have a tremendously big backstory. You don't have to have those dramatic incidents in your life. You could just basically have at the present moment might just be troubling enough as it stands. The present moment might not just be good enough. There might be lots of different things happening exactly as you've described, whether in COVID, etc. So that's where I believe there's a huge potential for people to gain more benefit from talking to a therapist or talking to a counsellor, because we give people permission that you don't have to be in that crisis-orientated mode as such. And that's where you mentioned the States. In Ireland, it's 11% of people access a mental health professional. In the UK, it's 28%, and in the US, it's 49%. So we're behind the curve, but we're most certainly because of, I suppose, the digital adoption that's happened throughout COVID. There's probably been 10 years of digital adoption in the last 11, 12 months. And essentially, basically, I believe more and more people see, while I go to the gym a couple of times a week, I go to yoga or go to Pilates, why wouldn't I talk to a mental health professional? Up until now, they feel they haven't had permission. Up until now, they felt that it's not for me, God, I'm not that bad yet. And to be honest, the industry in Ireland didn't really do a whole lot to try and help persuade people differently, because it was a very poor experience to try book an appointment. You might have had to leave a voicemail, get a return call a week later, ask your GP, who can I recommend as a counsellor. Maybe if you're going through the HSE, you might have to have a long waiting list. So nearly did everything we possibly could to try and force people not to go and talk to a counsellor. And at the same time, we're in that unique situation in Ireland, whereas there's a supply-demand imbalance in other countries where there's a shortage of mental health professionals. In Ireland, we have an abundance of them. And essentially, we basically have enough people here, but we don't have the platform that can give the people the access to it.
So just like we're talking now, I'm sure at this moment, there's a lot of your clientele and your counsellors are online having conversations all over the country, going through whatever they need to go through. And that's pretty cool. And I also know that you're visible on all of the social media platforms. So there's lots of advice and tips and all that kind of thing on a regular basis that are coming out. So if someone is listening and they're interested, check the website, fettle.ie, or some of your social media accounts.
We've had a fantastic last 8 or 9 months. So we launched in April, where we had 12 counsellors working through the platform. We now have 35, we'll have 50 by the end of the month. We will do 1,500 hours of affordable counselling. And to go back to that marriage or combination of my professional life and my personal experience, I'm tremendously proud of the team now that I'm building around in Fettle, of the investors that I have on board. We're looking to grow and we're looking to scale. But to be able to say, that the business is there and we're provided 1,500 hours of affordable counselling this month, that's fantastic.
Would any of them be able to handle a washed out 56-year-old?
Oh, I'm sure they would, Greg. I'm sure they would. So I know we've literally had clients in their 90s that are talking to counsellors, and that's
fantastic.
Not actually being facetious or in any way line. I genuinely have had clients that old, and the counsellors themselves, enjoy the fact that we've lots of counsellors from the west of Ireland, for example, who have a very limited pool of clients available to them to see. And now all of a sudden they're seeing Irish guys that are living in the Middle East, that are living in Dubai. So they're all delighted, basically.
Richard, what's happiness to you?
That's a very expansive question for me, I suppose. Peace of mind on a daily basis and just being able to go to sleep at night and put your head on the pillow and being grateful for who you are and what your day was. I think that for me was something that was elusive for a long, long time. That for me is that peace of mind. I think that's what all of us people that have struggled with alcohol would have strived for over many years, and we would have searched in many places and travelled to many different places looking for that peace of mind. That for me would be the core of happiness.
Yeah, and without a doubt now, Richard, you seem to have found your path. And I'm going to use a sporting analogy now to ask you the next question. When I talk about winning happy, for me, the Win Happy podcast is all about people chiseling out a life for themselves that has them figuring out who they are and what they like and what they don't like, and adjusting and maneuvering as you go along. So you find the things that you like and you enjoy. And I kind of say to people, if you love playing soccer or hurling in your case, and you're out on a pitch, it would be fairly pointless if there were no goalposts. And that feeling when you hit the ball perfectly, it hits the back of the net, and that kind of shaking the fist moment of elation. So those winning moments. So for you and going forward, what does winning look like?
Winning for me, essentially, basically, I have a clear set of milestones, roadmaps, and achievements that I'm looking to hit for my business. So when we started, initially as a founder and a startup founder, you're trying to get funded for your business. So you're trying to initially get people to back you, to invest you so that you can grow and scale. You're looking to get that product market fit if you want. For me, there's multiple goals, So in a personal life, as I say, in a relationship that I had thought I had lost, I've now got back. We have lots of plans for the future. That's fantastic. But from a business perspective, I have milestones where you're always looking for the next raise. You're always looking for the next territory you're going into, the next hire. I don't fear any competition, really. The only competition I have, or the biggest risk to my business, is the team that I have around me. So I feel unbelievably grateful that I've managed to build into Fettle right now. We've made some strategic key hires in terms of behavioural psychologist. Keelan O'Dwyer was one of the most experienced psychologists in Ireland. And all of these people are going to be bringing so much energy and so much enthusiasm for a business that's trying to be disruptive almost, if you want to put it that way. And I know that term gets thrown around a bit in startup parlance quite a lot, but that's essentially what we're trying to do, is democratise and normalise an industry that felt very, lived in an analog world, if you want.
I can see the salesman shining through again there now, Richard, and a bit of bite in you. You change characters quickly when you get into that kind of businessy sales mode, which is fantastic. I have two last questions for you. The first one is, what was your best day?
My best day, I have a sort of an immediate reaction that I want to try and answer the question as quick as possible. And I almost feel that I need to try and reverse this on you a little bit and just understand, like, is it from a business perspective? Is it from a personal perspective? Or what would you if you could kind of expand on that question a little bit?
You say, I'm not going to do that for you. I threw you the ball. A best day is a best day. And however you look at a best day.
Well, I climbed one or two routes, and I climbed one route in particular, which is called the Ghost, and it's in Dalkey Quarry, and I'm sure maybe you're familiar with the guys that go up there. A lot of people will walk up there, but you'll see the rock climbers there. Now, there's lots of other days in my life, but I always remember this particular route I climbed. I had trained for ages. I was in particularly at a good moment in life. I was in my very solid relationship, and I climbed that route. It's actually the picture that's on my LinkedIn profile. And that's a particular grade that I had never climbed before. I remember literally every foot placement on that route. And I have an instant recall for the route every time and any time that I've been sitting anywhere in a meeting or in a particularly troubling time in my head. All I have to do is remember that. And that's something that brings me enormous pride. And I think from a sporting perspective, I had never played senior club football, despite being very good at minor and under 21, etc. And then I came back to the GA club that I'm a part of, St. Anne's, and I think I was 27 when I made my senior club debut, and I played for the next 3 or 4 years. That was not one day, but I was so proud of that. I was very proud of that as well. Like,
the last thing I want to say to you is, you obviously had a fairly crap experience that sent you down a very dark path and threw you a challenge that you wrestled with for a long time. And between the sexual abuse and the challenges with alcohol, which I'm fairly sure are directly connected with it, you've got a fairly unique experience, Richard. You have a unique perspective that very few people will have, that gives you extra layers and extra depths that a lot of us don't have. So in a way, you're an expert at a particular level, if you get my drift. Yeah. You've got a bank of experience that a lot of people can't even touch. It was hard and it was tough, but you have that bank, and it does make you unique. So with that perspective and the things you've learned along the way, is there any little life tip you would give to anyone who's listening?
Well, to sound very sort of high level, acceptance is the answer to all your problems. And I didn't come up with that. It's in the book, or the recovery book, that I'm a part of that recovery group meeting. But acceptance is the answer to all your problems. I never could accept who I am, where I was, what I was doing, or why I was bodily and mentally a little bit different from other people. And until I could get that acceptance into my life, and I think this could be about anything, then I could start to make change. Now, I certainly won't try and take credit for coming up with that, and it sounds a little bit too simple, but there's so much depth to that one statement. And just on a personal level, like an actual practical level, a tip for me for something that has changed my life actually would be, I would have struggled to, I suppose, get invested in or to really buy what meditation and mindfulness was selling. And I downloaded an app by a guy called Sam Harris, who I'd have a lot of time for, and it's called Waking Up. And it goes through daily meditations, but it's the tone of his voice or it's the way he talks. It's not mystical, or which I normally would have perceived about meditation and mindfulness. And I buy what he's selling, and I've been able to build that into my life. Because very often when you kind of get somebody giving you a tip, they kind of stick with the acceptance is the answer to all your problems. But you know what? Give me something practical that I can do now today.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks a million for your phrase, but give me something real.
Give me something real. So if you've ever struggled trying to actually be consistent with daily meditation, which for me has been a life changer, the Sam Harris app, Waking Up, has been brilliant.
Richard, thanks a million for coming on the podcast. And you played a long, tough match.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like you're coming out the winner. So fair play to you. And thanks again.
Right. Well, Greg, I really, really appreciate your time today. And I've really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Good man yourself. Take it easy out there. Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.